Matt is here to share his expertise in our interview titled Short Form Video Content, Why Your Business Needs It. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you. I really appreciate you and your wisdom and looking forward greatly to this interview. So, could we start by just having you explain what you mean by short form videos and what platforms they are mainly used on?
So essentially, short form video is exactly what it sounds like. It's essentially content that's under 3 minutes in a video format. Now, mostly that's vertical video now, so it's made for phone screens first, so mobile friendly, basically.
Uh
So
huh.
essentially, it's under 3 minutes and it's video content that's vertical. And that now is one of the most consumed and shared forms of communication across the internet. So it's basically how we're all talking now.
Yeah, I'm seeing it's like everybody's so used to scrolling on their phone, and that's gotten to be the vertical format. Um,
Mm.
Back in
Yeah.
the
So
day,
the
go ahead.
no, sorry, go on.
Well, I was just thinking that like theater and so much we're used to in widescreen, but now with the phones and the scrolling, it seems like the short form vertical video is really taking off.
Yeah. It's become the most commonly used form of communication, and it's the way that most people access information now, especially
Uh
the
huh.
younger generations. And so, if we want to be involved in those kind of conversations, if we want to be speaking to those kind of people, then we need to be using the platforms in a way that they use them. So very simply put, if we want to talk to people under the age of say 35,
Uh huh.
then we need to be on the platforms that they're using in a way that they're using them. So that's been realized by all of the major players. So TikTok came to the fore a few years ago. As we know, it grew exponentially. It's become this great big sort of behemoth of a platform, and Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, they've all seen that, taken note of that, and started their own versions of that. So even though those platforms are quite new to this, so YouTube Shorts, as an example, is a very new one. Facebook Reels, although they tried previously with Lasso in the US, it
Uh
didn't
huh.
do very well, but they've tried again now with Reels. And so they've understood the power of short form video, and they're on board with that now. And that's great, because what that means is those skill sets that we built on TikTok, we can now use across the platforms. But also, and more importantly, and this is where it's great for us from a tactical point of view, it allows us all kinds of great levels of organic reach, because the platforms are all vying for your attention and for your content. So as long as you give them what they want, they will promote that for you.
Got it. And you use the word tactics. This makes me. My second question: what are the key components that make a short form video successful for businesses?
Well, there's a number of different versions of how you can look at that. And so if you're looking at views, if you're looking at virality, then you're looking at a sort of a melting pot of ideas. But essentially, you're going to start with a hook or a promise, and then you want to make sure that it's entertaining, and then you want to fulfill that promise and have a good call to action at the end. So ideally, it wants to be compressed into a short enough form that it can be easily digested by people as an introduction to who you are and what you do. So if we're looking at that virality, that could be a trend, it could be commentary on something that's happening. It could just be something amusing and fun. However, if you're looking from a business point of view or a knowledge based position, so if you're coming from a point of expertise or an authority, then obviously your content is going to hopefully be geared towards that. So
Right.
you'll still be looking to give a solid hook at the beginning, a promise of what you're going to deliver, but you have to make sure you come through with that. So you've got to do what they call stop the scroll. That's the
Uh
first
huh.
part of that game, because everybody's doing this these days, and
Yes.
we've the first thing we have to do is create a situation where they stop doing that. So we have to basically ask a question, present a value proposition, give them something to think about, something that's going to stop them from doing that, so that they then become engaged with the rest of what we're doing.
Excellent. And you sort of touched on this, but can you tell us why it's so important for businesses to use short form videos, and in particular, why now is a good time to do it?
Yeah, well, the short answer is that because it is the most shared and consumed form of communication online, video means that we should be involved with it. It's crazy not to. It's a bit like moving into the telephone generation and insisting on using carrier pigeons. It's really that ridiculous. We'd look at that as if it was nonsense, but that's actually how it is. There's an awful lot of people in the world that maybe were around before a lot of this technology sort of took a footing, and I myself included in that. By the way, I'm not born into this. I'm not of the generation where this is normal. I've had to learn it and understand it and become okay with it. But for the younger generations, millennials and down, this is every day. This is normal. This is just how their life is. They don't know anything different, and so we really do need to be on board with that and understand that that's the way the world is now. And then, secondly, it's a great opportunity for us right now today because, as I mentioned earlier, the platforms are competing with one another. They're desperate for your attention, they're desperate for your
Hmm.
content, they're desperate for your time. One of the things that we need to realize is that the platforms, they actually don't own anything themselves. They don't create any of their own content. If it wasn't for us, they'd just be this big empty expanse of nothingness, and there'd
Oh,
be
good
no
point.
reason for people to go there. So essentially, what we're looking to do is we're looking to make partners out of the platforms. We're looking to create a partnership, an understanding, a trust, where I say to the platforms, this is my content. I'm representing it in the right manner by my use of hashtags and explanations. And, I make sure that I show you what it is that I'm doing and who you should pass that on to. That's my half of the bargain. And their half of the bargain in return is to say, great, we're going to take that, we're going to put that in front of people, and hopefully they're going to want to watch it, want to engage with it, want to follow through with it, and then we both win. The problem comes, the sticking point comes when people don't understand that they don't actually owe us a thing, right? We've got to work for it, like with any
Hmm.
partnership. If we want that real estate, if we want to be on that end of the shopping aisle where people buy the bargains, if we want to be seen, then we have to offer enough value for us to take up that real estate because so many people are vying for it. But if we can get there, then that's an absolute goldmine for us because it creates a huge amount of organic reach, a huge amount of virality, and when you put that into context of, say, paid advertising on Facebook, that correlates to a huge amount of money when you think about the exposure levels. I mean, I've got multiple videos in the multiple millions, and that would cost a lot of money if I did that through traditional advertising.
Got it. You just used a phrase that really sticks with me and helps with my mindset. Partner with the platform.
Mm.
To think of
Yeah.
it that way is actually, I hope that all our viewers really can take that in because we are partnering and it's not just a simple business proposition. Excellent. Um, I'm wondering if you can share some consequences businesses might face if they don't get involved in short form content.
Oh, well, one of the obvious ones and easiest ones to answer is getting left behind, basically, and getting left out of the conversation. Fundamentally, that's probably the easiest way to describe it. I mean, we've all, I'm sure, heard the story of Blockbuster, and and one day they were enormous, they were huge, they had shops all over the countries, around the world, and here we are, and we just remember them as a cautionary tale now because they couldn't keep up, and they didn't keep up, and they made wrong choices along the way, and that's where we're at. We're at a point where technology has taken us this far, and we need to accept that that's where we are now, and that's how we are now, and we need to be able to move in that universe and make sure that whatever it is that we do is presented in that way and over those mediums. So for us to be relevant, for us to have a voice, for us to be recognized, then we need to have a presence on these platforms.
Got it. Your wisdom in this area is just shining through, and I so appreciate that. I have another question I'd like to ask you, and that has to do with some of the common obstacles that hold people back from diving into short form video content. Could you talk some more on that, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So there's a number of different misconceptions that people have. So we'll cut through some of those first. I think it's probably easiest. So what you'll find is people say that, oh, TikTok's just for kids. Right now, if we actually look at the numbers and we look at what's happening, what's actually happened is TikTok has matured in age. So as it's got
Uh-huh.
older, the audience has matured as well. And we're now in a situation where the large majority are between sort of 50 and 18. So there's actually, a good percentage of grown-ups, let's call it that, on the platform itself on TikTok. But as we've just discussed, where we're now into the other platforms, they already have a much more mature audience. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube itself. YouTube is essentially a place for people of my age. We tend to hang out on YouTube a lot. We spend an awful lot of time, um, consuming content over there. So whatever skills
Right.
we've picked up, on TikTok, we can transfer over there if we so need to. But basically, because the platforms are aging and doing what they're doing, and it's perfectly natural, that evolution, we've watched it happen with Facebook, we watched it happen with YouTube. They all monetized in 3 to 4 years. TikTok has done the same. The only difference really is the growth, and because TikTok has grown so rapidly, that's really the
Mhm.
only difference in regards to the evolution. Other than that, it's following very similar steps. So when we look at that, that's the first misconception. It's not just full of young people. The second one is that we have to behave in a way that's embarrassing or cringeworthy, or we have to make fools of ourselves. And
Mm.
again, that's not true at all. That's something that maybe was true at the very beginning when it first became TikTok from Musically, and there was a lot of lip syncing, a lot of dance routines,
Right.
things like that. And that's still an element on there, but it's certainly not one that you have to engage with. They're pushing educational content. There's a lot of call now for knowledge based stuff again across the platforms, and so if you're presenting from that point of view, you can build very strong audiences just through that alone. You don't have to make a fool of yourself anymore. Not that you ever really did. So those are the two main misconceptions that you want to get rid of. And once you've done that and you've pushed those to one side, then you can start addressing some of the other things, which is things like sometimes people don't want to be in front of camera.
Mm.
And so again, you can look at that and you say, well, you don't have to be in front of camera. There are lots of different ways where you can present information without ever putting your face in front of a screen. Or if you have team members, you could probably use one of those if you wanted to. But you can do all kinds of different ways of presentation without being on screen if that's what you felt. And I would suggest that if you're unsure about being on screen, if you feel that it's not for you, then it's better to just admit that from the beginning and play to your strengths rather than try and force weaknesses that is actually going to be detrimental in the longer term. So work out a strategy that's actually going to be beneficial to you from the word go. Then when you look at technology, which is another barrier, people are thinking, well, I can't edit, I don't know how to do a lot of these filters and things. And what's really interesting about that now is that there are apps that are out there that make it really, really simple, and
Mm.
it's incredibly cost effective, if not free. And the platforms themselves now are getting more and more. TikTok is extraordinarily clever in the filters it offers, the editing stuff that it does. The other platforms are sort of slowly catching up, but you've got things like CapCut and InShot is another one. There are free apps that you can do basic editing and things with. And so they cut through an awful lot of that. What was a really big barrier to entry, say 10 years ago, something that would cost thousands of pounds in
Right.
equipment and a huge learning curve, that doesn't exist anymore in the same way. So we can jump all of those fences really, really quickly. And it's just a case of making a start. I mean, you know yourself that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be doing something and moving forward. And so if you take anybody now that's got a really big presence on any of the platforms and you're feeling unsure about starting, then what I recommend is you find those people and you have a look at their very early stuff, the first two or
Right.
three videos. I guarantee you they're going to be dreadful, right?
Yeah.
um,
We've heard that
without
so many
question.
times in our interviews, the part about just getting started and that look what it looked like when I first got started. It's
Mm,
so, that's a common thread that I think everybody needs to really take in, that
yeah.
you won't get farther along unless you start.
No, absolutely right. Yeah, and it is such a forgiving medium because as much as we sort of complain about the attention span of millennials and
Right.
things, and there's that statistic of 8 seconds and what have you, and yeah, it's like, oh no, that's terrible. We really wish that maybe they'd pay a bit more attention longer term. But the good news is, yesterday is forgotten really, really quickly. So you can make those mistakes quite easily without having to worry about that it's going to be hanging around your neck 3 months from now, because 3 months from now, you can totally transform yourself into whatever it is you want to be. And nobody will remember that from 3 months before.
Right. As an interesting case in point, I've been in my Vimeo account now because of these interviews we've been doing and looking back at in the history of my videos from like say 4 years ago when I was doing some
Yeah.
stuff for our membership site. Is like, oh my God. I mean, yeah, my hair wasn't as gray, but I also was not as comfortable in front of the camera. So that's a huge point. And
Yeah.
you mentioned one other thing I'd like to just circle back on about education, using TikTok and short form video for education. For myself, as a retired professor, and if I was going to do something, I would think it should be on a long form YouTube video. How can somebody do educational type things in short form type video?
Okay. So education is being pushed across the board, right? So all the
Right?
platforms will help you with that if it's got value, right? So that's the first thing to sort of appreciate. Secondly, is that there's, again, we talked about tactics earlier on. There's a tactic that we can use, right? So essentially, what the way to look at this is, we don't want to cram as much as we can into, say, a minute's worth of content. What we actually want to do is establish one or two elements of a thing and talk about those, right? And that way, then we don't get overwhelmed and we don't overwhelm people with too much information. So if you look at, say, one of the NLP principles, that there's this basically, we can all handle 7 pieces of information plus or minus two at any given moment. So if we look at that and we think about cramming massive amounts of information into a minute video, then all we're going to do is overwhelm people, and they're not going to stick with it. They're going to switch off and wander off very quickly. So we want to try and borrow that down, and that's a skill set in itself. Learning how to say something succinctly to the point in a short amount of time, and that does take a little bit of practice. So if you think about a business networking event and they talk about an elevator pitch and they say you've got 30 seconds, go. Um, and you'll have people that have practiced it and polished it, and they'll have a couple of sentences that they repeat ad verbatim, and that's their elevator pitch. But then you'll have other people that are stutter and they'll get confused and they won't know what to say, and so the idea is to fit somewhere in the middle of that. It wants to be natural and it wants to be real, but you want to be able to get that information in that short amount of time. So that's a skill set all by itself, but that's one that's completely transferable. Learn to do that within that
Right?
setting, and then you can use that in all kinds of different ways, and it's great. But the main thing at the moment about short form video comes back to the attention span, comes back to just basic manners. When I was young, there was an obligation to listen to people. If somebody said,
Uh,
"Excuse me, I'd like to talk to you," we'd sit and we'd listen just out of politeness, right? Those days are gone, right? Now
mhm.
there's no need for people to do that anymore, and so we have to work on the premise that, number one, I have to stop the scroll. Number two, I have to give them something of value, and then number three, I have to give them a reason to come back. And hopefully what happens is the short form is like the top of the funnel. Yeah. So if we look at it as a funnel positioning and we say the short form content is right at the very top, that's our introduction. Hi, my name is Matt. This is what I do. I hope you find it interesting. Please come and have a look at some more. Hopefully then they'll move into the longer form content, so things like YouTube, Vimeo, as you mentioned, that kind of stuff. Hopefully then we can bring them into some of our free things, maybe some low level tripwire, paywall things, and then hopefully then we can bring them into our paid communities properly. And so essentially all that is
Right?
is an introduction. That's how I look at short form content. It's an introduction. It's a way to basically say hi to people, and it's a way for me to start a conversation in the same way as you would at a party or a social event. You wouldn't just walk up to a random stranger and give them your entire life history, or if you did, you wouldn't be surprised if they soon got bored and walked off. um, so I'm treating it like that very similarly. So it's here's some value. If you like that, and that resonated with you, come and see some more. And if you like that, then come on over to my longer form stuff and, step inside my community and have a look around, and we'll take it from there.
Got it. Would it be possible to, like, on a first TikTok video to introduce, let's say, hey, I'm going to be talking about such and such, and it has 7 sections, and so be sure to keep your eye out, and then and actually roll out on TikTok 7 short videos? Is that one strategy too?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. So when I'm coaching my clients, I work on a 5 pillars system. Now, this is a system that I've developed over years of doing this, both for myself and for clients and things. And I've worked out this what for me is I think a very powerful strategy. So it works on this 5 pillar principle, and within that principle, you've got what we call a rapport pillar. So that's basically making friends, a way for us to connect. So
Mm-hmm.
that could be content around similar problems, similar life issues, similar history, whatever it is that's going to basically create a rapport between us. Then we've got what I call an easy teach and a hard teach. So what I mean by that is if I was teaching somebody to boil an egg, but they've never boiled an egg before, and I forget to tell them to turn the oven on, they're going to be staring at that saucepan for like 3 or 4 hours, wondering why nothing's happening, right? So an easy teach will be something that's pretty obvious, but still needs to be shown. So when we're talking educational knowledge based, um, we've got to bear in mind that essentially our client base should be through a spectrum of capabilities and
Right.
levels and what it is they're going to require. So we're going to work through that. So then we've got the more advanced teach, which is essentially then talking about, say, egg recipes, different ways to serve eggs, however you want to look at that. Then we've got a showcase. So I say showcase, not show off, because what we don't want to do is go, hey, look at me, I'm brilliant, and just worship me from afar. What I do want to do is say, look, this is what is achievable if you follow my steps, if you understand what I'm teaching, if you apply these things, you can do these things as well. So that's the showcase part of it. And then we've got entertainment. There always has to be an entertainment factor. If I sat here bland, miserable, monotone, most people would very quickly just say, do you know what, I'm bored now, and start thinking about something else, right? And it shows. And so if you're excited about what you're talking about, if you believe in what you're talking about, if you're genuinely pleased to be sharing that information and having conversations with people, then that jumps out the camera, that gets across time and space. And so that's what we want to be doing with all of our content. So those are the 5 pillars that I suggest. And what I say is to basically have 1 or 2, maybe even 3 from each of those pillars as a start point on your platform, on your profile, because that way then it gives a person an opportunity to see a piece of content, say, oh, I'm interested, go over to your profile, have a little walk around and a look at a few other things, and build a bit of a picture about who you are and what you represent and what your value proposition is. So I think it's a good idea to have a few videos in, some content in, right from the very word go, so people have a reason to come back.
Excellent. Um, yeah, thinking about just making sure that people have a chance to kind of warm up to you and how that unfolds, and the idea of the 5 pillars, I really appreciate what you just said. So a little bit more on a personal note, I'm just wondering, has your background as a martial artist and author influenced your approach to creating engaging short form videos?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
The
Yeah,
short answer.
obviously. Yeah, well, there was the obvious need to promote the books and things, which is one of
Uh
the
huh.
reasons why I first started with social media and things in the first place, because I had a product and I needed an audience. So that was one of the first things. But obviously, delivering martial arts training and being a teacher and being in front of people for many, many years now, and also teaching all kinds of other people in security and all kinds of things like that, you get used to being front of stage and projecting,
Right.
and giving out energy to space. And so doing all of those things, plus delivering workshops and talks in schools and talking to businesses and training people, all of those kind of things meant that I'm quite okay with being the person at the front, if you see what I mean. And that then obviously translates to the small screen, because it's not really that much difference in the sense that you're you're delivering an outcome. So as you'll know yourself as an educator that you when you think about the outcomes, what it is that you're trying to get to your students, you look at those learning outcomes and you think, okay, how am I going to frame that delivery to achieve that success? And then how am I going to measure that success? How am I going to confirm that they now have that
Right.
knowledge? Um, and that's all I'm doing. I'm just doing it on a little screen.
Got it. You use the phrase giving energy to the space.
Mm.
I totally get that, and like running your energy. And I think it's important for people to realize that that camera lens is more than just something you stare at to say what you're saying. There is a energy flow, and your energetic presence really is felt by people, regardless of what the if it's 4K or if it's just 1080p or whatever. But that giving energy to space, that certainly is something that's a powerful thing for everybody to remember.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I tend to tell people the 10% thing. You know that old saying that the camera adds £10.
Yeah.
And that's what people have said for many years, right? And so I've changed that a little bit, and I say the camera takes away 10% of your energy.
Hmm.
And so you've got to basically be 10% more when you're delivering to a screen than you would in person. I don't know whether that's true or not. It's certainly not scientific. I've certainly not tested it in any way, but for me, it just seems to be about right. So obviously, we don't want to all turn into these crazy, hyperactive
Hmm.
children's
No,
presenters.
no.
But in the same vein, we do need to make sure that our emotion comes across, that our delivery is intact.
Right. The presence, the eye contact, that sense that when somebody sees your video, they can truly feel you. So, thank you so much for all of that. And so, do you have a parting message for our audience before we sign off?
Uh, no, not really, other than to say if you're not on short form video because you're worried about starting, then just go for it. Just enjoy it, even if nothing comes of it. Just do it and have fun. That's about it, really.
If you got benefit from this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and hit that bell notification so you know when our next video comes out. And we'd love to hear comments from you, so comment below. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.